Renu Rana Ra.
On this occasion I will convey the history of Roderic. Roderic the Last of the Goths is an 1814 epic poem composed by Robert Southey. The origins of the poem lie in Southey's wanting to write a poem describing Spain and the story of Rodrigo. Originally entitled Pelayo, the Restorer of Spain, the poem was later retitled to reflect the change of emphasis within the story. It was completed after Southey witnessed Napoleon's actions in Europe, and Southey included his reactions against invading armies into the poem. The poem was successful, and multiple editions followed immediately after the first edition. The story describes fighting over the inheritance of the Spanish throne and how Roderic manages to take over. After Roderic rapes Florinda, daughter of his important ally Count Julian and others change their allegiance and aid the invading Moorish army. During a battle against the Moors, Roderic is wounded and escapes to start a new life. Eventually, Roderic travels across Spain before determining that he must return to rescue Pelayo, an heir to the Spanish throne who was held prisoner by the Moors. After freeing Pelayo, he meets Florinda, who reveals that her rape was not Roderic's fault. The group allies itself with Count Pedro, and they build an army to wage war against the Moors. While fighting, Count Julian is assassinated by his own allies, and the Moorish army is broken and defeated. The poem ends with Roderic returning to the wilderness. Southey, like other poets who described the story of Roderic at the time, connected the Moorish invasion of Spain with Napoleon's invading of other countries. The story is also used to discuss the relationship of Islam and Christianity while promoting Southey's own views on religion. Regarding the rape scene, it is possible that Southey removed Roderic's guilt to create a more sympathetic character. Critics gave the work mixed reviews, but many believe that Roderic the Last of the Goths was Southey's greatest work. Some critics pointed out various flaws in the work, but most felt that the subject was well handled and appropriately chosen. The idea for Southey to write a poem about historical Spain, which would later become Roderic, originated in his writing a monodrama on Cava and her being raped by Rodrigo. In 1805, he decided to use the subject for his final epic. In 1808, Southey resumed working on his poem Curse of Kehama after he almost gave up poetry because of the reception of Thalaba the Destroyer and Madoc. This return to writing was promoted by the poet Walter Savage Landor, who encouraged Southey to complete the epic along with writing the work Pelayo, the Restorer of Spain. This poem would later be retitled Roderic the Last of the Goths. By 1812, Southey was working on various works, including the collection Omniana, and he continued to add sections to Roderic. After 1810, Southey began to change from Jacobin political feelings to support of the establishment and monarchies. While writing the epic, his feelings were shaped by the events of Napoleon's conquests in Europe and his invasion of Spain. Napoleon's actions provoked Southey to disapprove of one nation controlling another nation. These changing beliefs helped to shape Roderic, which involved the Moorish invasion of Spain. The poem was completed July 14, 1814. During this time, Southey was made a member of the Royal Spanish Academy. It was put into print in August and published in November. It was the last long poem that Southey would write. When Southey was told that Francis Jeffrey was going to write a bad review of the poem, he claimed, "Jeffrey can no more stand in my way to fame than Tom Thumb could stand in my way in the street. I consider him a public nuisance and shall deal with him accordingly." The poem had a second and third edition published in 1815. A fourth edition was published in 1816. The printed poem also included a series of notes, a common feature to his long poems, which drew complaints from reviewers. Southey's story of Roderic originally described Pelayo as the hero of the story and his enemy, Roderic, last Visigoth king, as the villain. However, Roderic was portrayed a more sympathetic life as the story changed focus from the focus on Spain to the focus on the tragedy of Roderic. The Visigoths, original rulers of Spain, fall under the invading Moors, which was provoked by the rape of Florinda by Roderic. However, the fall of the Visigoths was also due to internal strife and political disorder. In particular, there was disorder with the ascension of Roderic to the Spanish throne, as Roderic attained it after his father, Theodofred, was blinded by his uncle Witiza. During this time, Pelayo, cousin to Roderic and whose father was killed by Witiza at the prompting of his traitorous mother Fabiola, fled for his life from Spain. When Roderic takes over, he defends Witiza and spares his other relatives, but the survivors along with Count Julian also aid the Moors in invading Spain. In the subplot, Roderic's rape of Florinda leads to Count Julian, her father, turning against Roderic and aiding the Moors. However, Florinda feels that she possibly misled Roderic and caused the incident. She confesses these feelings to Roderic, who at that time was using the disguise of Father Maccabee. In her confession, she admits that they kissed and promised to meet again because she was passionately in love with him. However, she decided that her actions were wrong because he was married and she determined that she would become a nun. When she met with Roderic later, he tells her that he wants to leave his wife. In turn, she reveals that she wanted to become a nun, which leads to a fight and, without any description or explanation, she was taken. The poem's story begins shortly after the Moors invade. The Visigoths are conquered at Guadalete in 711 AD, and Roderic escapes from the battle to start a new life as a hermit. He is plagued with remorse and he feels that all he has brought is suffering. He constantly dreams of Christ bleeding and sees images of Florinda's rape. Eventually, Romano, a monk, is able to comfort Roderic as they travel to a coast hermitage. However, Romano dies and Roderic is left with only his despair as a companion. This life is interrupted by a dream of Rosilla, Roderic's mother, chained and imprisoned until Pelayo saves her. He interprets the dream as a command from God to help his country. Roderic, changed and aged, travels through his country to the unconquered land of Cantabria. After he enters into a ruined city, he meets Adesinda, a woman burying her family. She, the only survivor, tells how the Moors had killed everyone and left her alive to be a concubine. She escaped by killing her captor in his sleep and returned to the city to mourn over the dead. Roderic is given a new name, Maccabee, and is sent by Adesinda to avenge the people killed by the Moors. Roderic travels to a monastery and learns of the fall of the Visigoths. The only one who has not abandoned the country is Pelayo, but he was a captive at Córdoba. At the monastery, Roderic is ordained before he sets off to free Pelayo. While traveling, he hears stories about himself and people debating over the cause was of the Moorish invasion. Roderic overhears one old man defend him, who turns out to be his tutor Siverian. Siverian, also seeking to free Pelayo, joins with Roderic and they go to Córdoba. They stop by Roderic's old home before going to the tomb of Theodofred. While there, an individual challenges them to fight, and it is revealed that it is Pelayo, who was allowed leave to pray. Roderic and Pelayo discuss how to save their country before Roderic accepts Pelayo as his king. Pelayo returns to his imprisonment while planning his escape, where he is joined by Alfonso, the son of Count Pedro who wishes to marry Pelayo's daughter, and by Florinda, who is hiding to avoid marriage. Together, they escape the city and meet up with Roderic and Siverian. While in the desert, Florinda confesses the events of her rape to Roderic and reveals that she truly loved Roderic, whereas his wife, Egelona, was now married to Abd al-Aziz ibn Musa, a Moorish leader. She also admits that she felt guilty for the seduction. Roderic accepts that his sin was from tragic circumstances and not from his own fault. After the confession, they travel to the land of Count Pedro, father of Alfonso. While there, they discover an army of men wanting to be led off to war. When Pedro sees that the hostages, Pelayo and Alfonso, are free, he decides to go to battle. To settle any past family problems, Pelayo's daughter and Pedro's son marry, and Alfonso is made the heir of the kingdom of Leon and promises to keep fighting until the Moors are defeated. However, Moors come and attack at the same time but are stopped by the warriors. A captured Moor tells Pelayo that another invasion force was sent to Pelayo's old castle and the army sets out. When they arrive at the castle, there is no one to be found. It turns out that Pelayo's family was led by his wife, Gaudiosa, into hiding. When the Moors came, Adacinda was able to defeat the raiding party and free any captives. After blowing a horn as a signal to his people, Pelayo is reunited with his people. Roderic is reunited with his mother but quickly leaves before he talks to her. When Siverian goes to find out what was wrong, he realizes that Roderic is overcome with emotion and figures out that Roderic was his old student. The plot transitions to the Moors' army as they are busy attacking any rebels. The army is supported by the Spanish traders. Orpaz, a Moorish leader who wanted Florinda as his wife and Julian's lands as his own, begins to work against Julian and turns the Moors against him. After Orpaz accuses Julian of inability to convert his own daughter to Islam, Florinda returns to her father with Roderic at her side. After fighting over religion, Roderic tells Julian that Julian is responsible for Spain's misery. Julian attacks Roderic for raping his daughter, but Florinda intervenes and defends Roderic. The rest of the story describes the reconquest of Spain and the defeat of the Moors by internal fighting. The Moor Abd al-Aziz is assassinated. This causes further suspicions to be laid against Julian, and his rivals decide to assassinate him. Guisla, Pelayo's sister, pretends to join the Moors and convinces them to attack the city of Covadonga. The Spanish army sets a trap in a valley and surrounds the Moors. A quick battle follows, and the Spaniards are able to avenge themselves upon the Moors. At the same time, Julian is assassinated. As he dies, Julian, knowing he was betrayed, tells his loyal troops to join up with the Spaniards. Before he finally passes, he is brought to a chapel dedicated to Saint Peter and is received back into the Christian faith. The poem ends with Julian's men joining Pedro's forces as Orpaz is killed by Roderic. Taking up a horse, Roderic leads Pelayo's and Pedro's troops against the Moors and everyone realizes Roderic's true identity as the previous king. As they begin to fight against the Moors, the Spanish change Roderic the Goth and Roderic and Vengeance as they began to kill all of the Moors in sight. After the battle, Roderic disappears once again into hermitage. That's the history that I can convey this time. I hope it's useful. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe.